take a look from the right as Bill now takes off, and let's listen to the sound of the propeller tips going supersonic at about 2,500 RPM. Bill right on the deck and accelerating now for 130 miles per hour. Up he goes now, rolling the airplane into a 4-point hesitation roll on takeoff. This airplane, believe it or not, weighs 5,500 pounds. Only 600 horsepower. Some of the maneuvers that you're going to see Bill Leff fly today are actually ones that require him to have 2 hands on the stick. Bill Leff has been flying in air shows. This is his actually his 34th season flying air shows. He's performed over 1,000 performances in this Texan. Flying the barrel roll, rolling around an imaginary point into the sky, endeavoring to start and stop at the same altitude and airspeed using coordination of the stick, the throttle, and the rudder. All his control surfaces working hard to do that. All right, now coming back in from the right, Bill Leff, who, let's see, as I recall, just turned 50 years old just last June. And his 60th birthday, got to attend his birthday party up at his home in Dayton, Ohio, and watch him as he does this beautiful, super slow roll across the line. Bill began at 15 years of age, and since that time, he has flown over 200 types of aircraft. He's a former airline pilot. He's a former airline pilot simulator instructor. He has flown aircraft in government contracts with very, very sophisticated sensors and testing equipment aboard for the United States Air Force. And he gets his big love from flying this big old 5,500-pound Texan. The Texan has been flying since 1939. And this is in 1939 or 1938. Gonna have to get straightened out on that. Just about 70 years since the Texan's been around. And depending on whose book you read, and the history books are not all in agreement on this, upwards of 22,000 Texans and their variants have been manufactured. They were flown not only by the United States Army Air Force, known as the T6, but also as the SMJ. The Royal Air Force and the Royal Canadian Air Force use the aircraft as well, and they call it the Harvard. And these airplanes were being delivered to the Royal Canadian Air Force prior to America's entry into World War II. Neutrality laws made it illegal to fly a warplane across the border from a neutral country to a combatant country, because Canada, as part of the United Kingdom, was at war with Germany prior to December 8, 1941. These airplanes had to be flown to the border, landed, stopped, pushed across the border, restarted, and flown to training bases in Canada. Well, U.S. and Canadian customs officials up in Hampton, Maine, got a little creative. What they did was land the airplanes, stop them, politically moved the border temporarily to the tail of the aircraft, started them up again and flew them onto their bases. That's how they got around. They got a lot more planes up there to the Royal Canadian Air Force. 180 miles per hour, diving down, now climbing up. Watch him as he gets to the top. Over the top, tilts his head back, looks at the runway and pulls through the beautiful roundhouse salute. How about a nice round of applause for Bill Leff? And last night's show, he flew his Starfire night sky show with lights flashing all over the airplane and fireworks on the wingtips. It was really, really fun. Prior to America's entry into World War II, the British were also using aircraft built in America, the Curtiss P-40 Warhawk. And in 1940, the British Purchasing Commission went to the president of North American Aviation, Dutch Kindleberger, and said, listen, we need some more fighters, we need some more Warhawks. The way that your company, North American Aviation, builds these harbor trainers for us, would you build Tomahawks, Curtiss P-40 Tomahawks or Warhawks under license, which means that North American Aviation would have had to retool and get all the information and production line information from Curtiss and build somebody else's airplane. Well, Dutch Kindleberger said, we don't want somebody else's airplane. Give us 120 days. Well, they had in their hip pocket some information that they'd gotten on trips to Germany back in 1938 about a very, very special wing known as the laminar flow wing with a similar shaped top and bottom. It was a very fast wing that the Germans had knowledge of. So Dutch Kindleberger got together with his guys, his chief designers, Edgar Schmidt, Ray Rice, and Lee Atwood. They had a little meeting and they got back to the British Purchasing Commission and said, folks, you give us 120 days, we'll build you a completely new airplane. And reluctantly, the British Purchasing Commission, on behalf of the Royal Air Force, said, okay. And in 117 days, the first Mustang came off the line in 1940. He goes up, goes into inverted, holds it there, goes across the top and rolls it. Oh, there's the gear that just appeared. I guess he put the gear up or down or whatever, but he certainly did extend it. He'll be coming back into land here shortly. The first Mustangs had Allison V12 engines in them. And they did not perform particularly well at altitude. And I mentioned before when we saw Sean Carroll fly earlier this morning that the British decided that they would put the Rolls-Royce in the Mustang cowling, and North American's Mustang with the Merlin power became the aircraft that many believe was the finest fighter aircraft of World War II. At least that's what those who flew it think. There were others who felt maybe the P-47 or the P-38 was better, but those who flew the Mustang really loved it. All based on the great design that North American put into this airplane, flown by Bill Leff of Dayton, Ohio, as he slows the airplane down to some 70 miles per hour. Remember, this is just a 600 horsepower engine. It's got 5,500 pounds of weight, and he's slowing it down, pointing it into the wind, going slower and slower every second, pulling that nose up for the Texan high alpha pass. Working the power like a crazy guy, that's great stuff. An incredible pilot. He's been flying corporate aircraft as well for 30-some years. West Winds, Learjets. He's even made 4 trips in his aircraft across the Gulf of Mexico. When Bill was a youngster, being in Dayton, Ohio, and wanting to earn money to get flying licenses, get flying lessons, he used to deliver newspapers as a paperboy to the former home of the Wright brothers. He keeps this airplane polished up just beautifully. And you may have seen Bill Leff's airplane on YouTube. Jim Tucherone knew I was going there when I said you may have seen, because just last July, wasn't it just last July? Yeah, last summer, Bill was going from the Peoria, Illinois Air Show up to the big aviation celebration at Oshkosh, Wisconsin for the EAA, Experimental Aircraft Association fly-in. His son was in the back seat. And while they were right near Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, the engine seized up and quit with the propeller straight up and straight down, stopped dead. 2 minutes later, he would have been out over top of Lake Winnebago and had to put it in the water. But Bill Leff, in this very airplane, decided he was going to put it down on a highway. He was doing fine until he saw 2 police cars under him. So Bill Leff, running out of options, running out of airspeed, running out of altitude, bounced his airplane in between the 2 cop cars, got enough altitude to go over the second police car, and landed on the highway, and it's all on the dashboard cam. So you could go watch it on YouTube. A phenomenal job. If there hadn't been a road sign, he wouldn't have damaged the airplane at all, but he screwed it and had to have the wing replaced. But what a great pilot he is as he does his roll and sets up for approach to landing. I hope you'll join me as we give a great congratulatory applause to Mr. Bill Leff. All right, he's not going to land now. I think we're going to get one last photo pass. So get your cameras ready. This is a great chance to see one of the great painted, unpainted, and highly polished T6s around. Propeller tips making that supersonic sound. You know, some of these T6s were actually pressed back into service after World War II as T6 Gs. They were outfitted with white phosphorus smoke rockets, and they were sent in as forward air controllers during the Korean conflict in the early 1950s, during the dawn of the jet age. One of the problems that existed was that the fast-moving jets were having difficulty spotting targets. So they got these guys in slow-flying T6s. They would spot the targets. They would shoot the Willie Pete's or the white phosphorus rockets, which would billow white smoke. And then the pilot of the T6, flying what was known as a mosquito mission, would then call up to the fast-moving jets and say, "Hit the smoke." The jets would dive in, destroy the target. Now Bill Leff's going to bring it in for a landing as he slows it down. The big, thick wing on this Texan makes it docile in the air, but the landing gear is pretty close. The main gears are really close together. So it's a little bit touchy on landing, just like the Stearman is. But Bill puts it down on a wheel landing and drops the tail wheel. He's got the canopy already open, getting himself a little breeze, and he'll taxi by, and we'll be able to say a nice thank you to Bill Leff as he comes by. Again, a huge thank you to our main sponsor, Langley Federal Credit Union.
Well, thank you. Just a little bit about your pilot today. He is retired from the United States Air Force, and he flew F-15s for over 20 years. He has over 3,400 hours in that aircraft. He also flew for 2 years in the F-4 as the 82nd ATRS Squadron Commander in Hampton before retiring in 2006. You'll see the F-4 fly